Please, someone help me. I cannot go further." The desperate cry shattered the dawn mist hovering over the wooden bridge. Aelith froze, clutching her small bundle of herbs to her chest. At 9 winters old, she knew better than to reveal herself to strangers, especially those who sounded like they belonged to the world beyond the village, a world that had never shown kindness to orphans with bare feet and ragged tunics. Through the swirling river vapors, she spotted a figure in scarlet velvet, clutching the railing with white-knuckled desperation. The woman's cloak, trimmed with ermine fur, dragged in the mud, its hem darkened with what looked like blood. Even from a distance, Aelith could see the pain etched across her face. Noble features contorted as she attempted another step. "I'll die here," the woman whispered to herself, her voice carrying over the rushing water below. "After everything, I'll die on this wretched bridge." Aelith should have run. The village elders warned against helping strangers, especially fine-dressed ones who might accuse a ragged child of thievery. But something in the woman's voice reminded her of her mother before the plague took her, desperation wrapped in dignity. "I can help you walk, milady," Aelith said, emerging from behind the birch trees that lined the riverbank. "If you promise not to send me back to the orphanage." The woman's head snapped up, her eyes widening at the sight of the small, skinny girl with tangled hair and a face smudged with dirt. Despite her obvious pain, she straightened her posture, a habit ingrained since birth. "Who are you, child? Where are your parents?" "Dead, milady. The plague took my mother 2 winters ago. She was a healer." Aelith stepped closer, unafraid, yet cautious. "I know you're hurt. I can help." The woman hesitated, then her shoulders slumped slightly. "I am Princess Rowena of Dunhallow." She glanced over her shoulder, fear flashing across her face. "Raiders attacked the castle before dawn. My guards, they're all dead. I need to reach the abbey beyond the forest." Aelith's eyes widened. Even in her isolated existence, she knew of Princess Rowena, the king's only daughter, whose beauty and wisdom were said to match her fierce spirit. The princess who once rode through the village square, distributing bread during the harsh winter that followed the plague. "Your ankle is swollen," Aelith observed, her mother's healer instincts surfacing. "You need herbs for the pain, and cold water for the swelling." Rowena attempted a smile that turned into a grimace. "Can you truly support me, small as you are? I fear I've twisted it badly." Without answering, Aelith ducked under the princess's arm, positioning her slight frame to bear some of Rowena's weight. The princess smelled of rosewater and fear, an odd combination that made Aelith's nose twitch. "My mother said pain shows us who we truly are," Aelith murmured, taking a careful first step. "Lean on me, milady." Together they shuffled across the bridge, each plank groaning beneath their uneven steps. The mist clung to their skin, dampening Rowena's fine gown and Aelith's threadbare tunic alike. When they reached the midpoint, Aelith felt the princess falter. "I cannot," Rowena began. "You can," Aelith interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness. She reached for the small wooden medallion hanging from a leather cord around her neck, her mother's last gift. The oak symbol carved into its surface was worn smooth from constant touching. "Here, wear this. It protects those with just hearts." She slipped it over her head and, standing on tiptoes, placed it around the princess's neck. Rowena touched it with trembling fingers. "What magic is this?" "Not magic, milady. Just truth. My mother carved it from the heart of an oak struck by lightning but still living. She said it reminds us that even broken things can stand strong." They continued their slow journey, reaching the far side as the first true light of day crept over the eastern hills. In the clearing beyond, beneath the spreading branches of an ancient oak, Aelith helped Rowena sit. "Wait here. I'll fetch help from the village." But when Aelith ran to the nearest homes, doors slammed in her face. The miller spat at her feet. An old woman chased her away with a broom. "We want no trouble from forest rats," growled the blacksmith. His hammer paused mid-swing. "What if she's a witch in disguise? These forest girls never bring anything good." Aelith returned to the clearing empty-handed but determined. The princess had fallen unconscious, her face pale as winter frost. With trembling fingers, Aelith recalled her mother's teachings: elderberry for fever, lemon balm for pain, stone moss for inflammation. She chewed them carefully, applying the paste to Rowena's swollen ankle. Throughout the night, she kept watch, singing softly songs half-remembered. "Sleep, sleep with the wind's branches, for the oak watches over your thoughts." As dawn broke, the ground trembled beneath them. Horns sounded on the ridge. 30 knights in gleaming black armor appeared among the trees, the banners of Dunhallow flapping in the morning breeze. Commander Theodric dismounted first, his armor gleaming despite the morning dew. He dropped to one knee before the unconscious princess, his weathered face creased with concern. "Your Highness, by all the saints, we followed your trail of blood through the forest." Rowena stirred, her eyelids fluttering open. She looked disoriented until her gaze settled on the medallion still clutched in Aelith's dirt-stained fingers. "It was her," the princess whispered, her voice weak but unwavering. "This child saved me when everyone else would have left me to die." The knights exchanged uncertain glances. One with a scar bisecting his right eyebrow sneered openly. "Your Highness, this is merely a street urchin. Look at her rags. Smell her filth. She probably stole your jewels while you slept." Aelith shrank back, her instincts urging her to flee into the forest's protective shadows. But Rowena's hand shot out with surprising strength, gripping her wrist. "Silence, Sir Aldrich," she commanded. "This girl is worth more than all of you combined with your polished armor and gleaming shields. She has honor. She has heart." Theodric studied Aelith with narrowed eyes. The girl refused to cower, meeting his gaze despite her fear. Something in her stance, pride without arrogance, gave him pause. "What is your name, child?" he asked, his tone softer than before. "Aelith, sir," she replied, "daughter of Merwin the healer." Recognition flickered across his face. Merwin, the woman who saved half the castle servants during the Black Fever. Aelith nodded, her chin lifting slightly. "My mother, sir. Before the sickness took her too." Theodric stood, towering over the small girl. With deliberate ceremony, he removed his glove and extended his bare hand. "Then I owe you a debt twice over, Aelith, daughter of Merwin. Once for your mother's service, and now for the princess's life." Before Aelith could respond, Sir Aldrich stepped forward, his armored hand resting meaningfully on his sword hilt. "Commander, with respect, we must return Her Highness to the castle immediately. The king will want to know his daughter is safe. This distraction can wait." "Distraction?" Rowena's voice cut through the clearing like a blade. She struggled to sit upright, her face pale with effort. "This distraction carried me across the bridge when my own strength failed. She treated my wounds when your precious knights were nowhere to be found." The princess's words hung in the air. Sir Aldrich's face darkened, but he dared not contradict her directly. "As you say, Your Highness," he conceded with a stiff bow. "But we must return to Dunhallow without delay. The raiders may still lurk in these woods." Theodric nodded. "The princess needs proper care. We ride immediately." He turned to Aelith. "Your service ends here, child. Return to your village with our thanks." "No." The single word from Rowena silenced them all. The princess struggled to her feet, wincing as she put weight on her injured ankle. "She comes with us," she declared. "I will not leave her to the mercy of villagers who turned her away when she sought help." Aelith stared in disbelief. "But, milady, I belong here, in the forest. I know nothing of castles." "You know kindness," Rowena replied simply. "That is rarer in castle walls than you might think." Without waiting for further objections, Theodric lifted the princess onto his stallion. He hesitated only briefly before extending his hand to Aelith. "It seems you are coming to Dunhallow, healer's daughter." The journey to the castle took most of the day. Aelith rode before Theodric, her small hands clutching the horse's mane. She had never been on a horse before, had never been further than the forest's edge. With each mile, her heart pounded harder. What awaited her in the stone fortress looming on the horizon? As they approached the castle gates, Aelith gasped. Dunhallow rose from the hillside like something from a dream. Towers of dark stone piercing the clouds, banners of midnight blue and silver fluttering from their peaks. The massive walls seemed to touch the sky itself. The common folk parted before the knights, their whispers following Aelith like persistent shadows. "Who is that child? Why does she ride with the commander? Look at her filthy rags beside their finery." Inside the castle courtyard, servants rushed to attend the princess. Rowena was quickly surrounded by ladies in waiting, their silk gowns rustling as they fussed over her. The princess's eyes sought Aelith's over their shoulders, a silent reassurance. Aelith stood forgotten in the chaos, her bare feet cold against the stone courtyard. She felt smaller than ever, a speck of dust in a world of giants. Nobles passing by wrinkled their noses at her presence, whispering behind jeweled hands. "What is that creature doing here? Someone call the guards to remove this beggar child." The smell. Is this what our castle has come to? A boy in fine velvet, perhaps 12 summers old, approached with open curiosity. Are you really the forest witch who saved the princess? He asked, too loudly. I'm no witch, Aelith replied, her voice steady despite her fear. Just a healer's daughter. Gareth! A sharp voice cut through the courtyard. A tall woman in midnight blue robes strode toward them, her face a mask of disdain. Step away from that girl. Immediately. The boy retreated, his eyes still wide with fascination. The woman, Lady Eldrida by the crest on her robes, circled Aelith like a hawk considering a field mouse. So, she said coldly, this is the orphan who supposedly saved our princess. Perhaps a reward of copper pennies would be appropriate before sending you back where you belong. From across the courtyard, Rowena's voice rang clear. She belongs where I say she belongs, Lady Eldrida, and that is here, at Dunhallow. All eyes turned to the princess, now standing with the support of her ladies. Despite her disheveled appearance and obvious pain, her authority was absolute. This child saved the heir to the throne of Dunhallow, Rowena continued. She will be treated with the respect due a savior of the royal blood. Lady Eldrida's lips pressed into a thin line. As your highness commands, she said, each word dripping with disapproval. Where shall we house your little savior? Rowena's smile was sweet and terrible. In the chambers adjoining my own, of course. Where else would I keep the guardian of my life? 3 days passed like a dream for Aelith. The chambers adjoining Princess Rowena's were larger than the entire orphanage where she had spent her bleakest days. Servants brought her food on silver platters, each meal more abundant than all she had eaten in a month of foraging. They scrubbed her until her skin was raw, dressed her wounds, and clothed her in garments of linen so fine she feared they might tear at her touch. But for all the castle's grandeur, Aelith found herself longing for the forest's familiar embrace. The stone walls pressed in around her and the constant whispers followed her like persistent shadows. A pity case. The princess's little pet. How long before she steals the silver and runs? On the morning of the 4th day, a sharp knock roused Aelith from restless sleep. A stern-faced woman entered without waiting for a response, her arms laden with folded garments. I am Matilda, head of the royal household, she announced. You are summoned to the Great Hall. The king returns today and wishes to see this miracle child his daughter speaks of so highly. The woman's tone made clear her skepticism. The king? Aelith's voice emerged as a whisper. Indeed, though what his majesty will make of you, I cannot say. Matilda's gaze swept critically over Aelith. At least you're clean now, though we must do something about that hair. You look like you've been dragged backward through a bramble patch. An hour later, Aelith stood at the entrance to the Great Hall, her heart thundering against her ribs. She wore a simple gown of deep blue, Dunhallow's color, with silver embroidery at the sleeves and hem. Her wild hair had been tamed into a single braid, adorned with a small silver clasp. Remember, Matilda whispered harshly, curtsy when presented. Speak only when spoken to. Address the king as Your Majesty and nothing else. Aelith nodded, though her legs felt like water beneath her. The massive doors swung open, revealing a cavernous hall filled with nobles in their finery. Hundreds of eyes turned toward her, some curious, most coldly dismissive. At the far end, upon a dais of polished stone, sat King Cedric of Dunhallow. His frame, once powerful, now seemed diminished beneath the weight of his royal garments. Beside him sat Princess Rowena, her ankle bandaged but her posture regal. Approach, commanded the herald, striking his staff against the floor. The walk seemed endless. Each step on the polished stone echoed like thunder in Aelith's ears. She focused on Rowena's encouraging smile, ignoring the sneers and whispers from the assembled court. So, this is the forest child who saved my daughter. King Cedric's voice was like gravel, worn by years of command. His eyes, the same shade as Rowena's, studied Aelith with penetrating intensity. Aelith dropped into an awkward curtsy, just as Matilda had taught her. Yes, Your Majesty. Look at me, child. She raised her eyes, meeting his gaze directly. Something flickered across the king's weathered face. Surprise, perhaps, at her lack of fear. My daughter tells me you carried her across the bridge when she could not walk, tended her wounds when she was abandoned, and kept her safe through the night while my knights searched. Is this true? I only did what anyone would do, Your Majesty. A ripple of derisive laughter swept through the court. King Cedric silenced it with a glance. That is precisely what my daughter said you would answer, he replied, the faintest hint of a smile touching his lips. Yet we both know anyone would not have done the same. My own nobles passed that bridge that morning, fleeing the raiders. None stopped to aid a woman in distress. He leaned forward, his crown catching the light from the high windows. Why did you help her, child? Did you know she was the princess? No, your majesty, Aelith replied honestly. I thought she was just a lady who needed help. My mother taught me that healing hands should never choose who deserves their touch. Your mother was the healer Merwin, the king said. It wasn't a question. Aelith's surprise must have shown on her face, for the king nodded. I remember her. She saved many during the Black Fever, including my sister, a woman of remarkable skill and courage. From the crowd, a harsh voice cut through the moment. Sire, while this child's assistance was fortunate, surely we have more pressing matters to discuss. The raiders who attacked the castle. The speaker was a tall man with a sharply trimmed beard, his velvet doublet emblazoned with a falcon crest. Lord Radolf, master of the hunt and cousin to the king himself. The raiders, yes. King Cedric's voice hardened. The same raiders who somehow knew the precise moment to strike, when our defenses were weakest. A curious coincidence, wouldn't you agree, Lord Radolf? An uncomfortable silence fell over the hall. What I find most interesting, the king continued, is how my daughter was left completely unprotected, while so many nobles managed to escape with their valuables intact. His gaze swept the assembled court, many of whom suddenly found the floor fascinating. And yet, when all others failed her, this child, this orphan with nothing to gain, risked everything to save the heir to Dunhallow. King Cedric stood, his movement causing the entire court to bow their heads. He descended the dais steps with deliberate slowness until he stood directly before Aelith. Kneel, daughter of Merwin. Confused, Aelith dropped to her knees. The king drew his ceremonial sword, a blade rumored to have been forged in the first days of Dunhallow. Its polished surface gleamed in the torchlight as he rested it lightly on her right shoulder, then her left. For courage beyond your years, for loyalty unlooked for, and for service to the crown of Dunhallow, I name you Aelith, first warden of the princess's guard. A collective gasp rippled through the hall. Lord Radolf stepped forward, his face flushed with indignation. Sire, this is unprecedented. The child is not of noble birth. She has no training, no lineage worthy of such honor. No lineage? The king's voice was dangerously soft. Her mother saved hundreds when the Black Fever came, including your own son, Radolf, though your memory seems conveniently short. He turned back to Aelith, who remained frozen in shock. Rise, warden. From this day forward, you shall be educated alongside my daughter, trained in the ways of the court and the skills of protection. Your place is at her side now and always. As Aelith stood on trembling legs, Lord Radolf's eyes burned with barely concealed rage. Princess Rowena descended from the dais, moving with grace despite her injury, and placed a silver chain around Aelith's neck. From it hung a pendant bearing the royal crest of Dunhallow, a raven with wings outstretched, clutching an oak branch in its talons. The raven for wisdom, Rowena explained softly, and the oak for strength, both of which you showed when all others failed. The princess turned to address the stunned court. Let it be known throughout the kingdom that this child, deemed worthless by so many, has been found to possess the truest nobility. Not the nobility of birth, but the nobility of the heart. In that moment, standing before the assembled might of Dunhallow, Aelith understood that she had crossed a bridge far more significant than the wooden one spanning the river. There would be no returning to her former life, for better or worse. Her path was now bound to the princess she had saved. Seasons passed like leaves on the river. Summer faded to autumn. Autumn surrendered to winter's grip, and winter finally yielded to spring's gentle persistence. Throughout it all, Aelith remained at Rowena's side, no longer a ragged orphan, but not quite belonging among Dunhallow's nobility either. Each morning she trained with Commander Theodric, learning not the heavy sword arts of knights, but the swift, practical combat of royal guardians. Each afternoon she studied alongside Princess Rowena, history, languages, court etiquette, her mind as quick as her hands. And each evening, she returned to her chambers exhausted, carrying bruises on her body and knowledge in her head. Stand straighter, Matilda would chide, adjusting Aelith's posture for what seemed the 1,000th time. A guardian must appear formidable even when still. Recite the noble houses of the Western Marches, Master Anselm would demand, His ancient eyes narrowed as Aelith stumbled through the complex lineages. "Faster," Theodric would command as she practiced with the slender guardian's blade that still felt awkward in her hand. An assassin won't wait for you to find your footing. Yet for all the trials, there was joy too. Rowena's friendship proved true and unwavering. In private moments, they were not princess and guardian, but simply two girls, one teaching the other about court gossip and royal protocols, the other sharing forest lore and healing knowledge preserved from her mother's teachings. But not everyone welcomed Aelith's rise. Lord Radolf watched her with thinly veiled contempt, his faction at court following his lead. They called her the King's Stray, behind cupped hands, mocked her simple origins, and created obstacles at every opportunity. 1 year to the day after Aelith had first entered Dunhallow, the kingdom prepared for the Spring Festival, a celebration of renewal, and the princess's 16th birthday. The castle buzzed with preparations, and Aelith found herself caught in the whirlwind of activity. "You'll need to be especially vigilant," Theodric warned during their morning training. "Large gatherings provide perfect cover for those with ill intent." Aelith nodded, her mind already racing through potential threats and vantage points. The year had changed her, hardened her in some ways, refined her in others. The skinny orphan remained in her quick movements and watchful eyes, but something new had been forged within her, a sense of purpose, of belonging. On the morning of the festival, Aelith stood at attention beside Rowena's chambers as noble guests arrived bearing gifts. Each visitor was screened with practiced precision, Aelith's eyes noting every detail, hands too close to concealed weapons, gazes that lingered too long on the princess, nervous gestures that might betray ill intent. "Presenting Lord Radolf, Master of the Hunt, and his son Sir Gareth," announced the chamberlain. Aelith stiffened imperceptibly. Gareth, the same boy who had called her Forest Witch on her first day, had grown into a gangly youth whose arrogance matched his father's. Lord Radolf bowed with practiced grace, though his eyes never softened. "Your Highness," he said to Rowena, "may I present our humble gift in celebration of your natal day?" He gestured, and a servant stepped forward bearing a small wooden chest. Aelith moved forward instinctively, positioning herself to intervene if necessary. "With your permission, my lord," she said, her voice level despite the tension. Radolf's smile tightened. "Of course. The vigilant guardian must inspect all gifts." "How thorough?" Aelith examined the chest carefully before allowing it to be opened. Inside lay an exquisite hunting bow of yew wood, its limbs inlaid with silver. "It is said," Radolf explained, "that the first queen of Dunhallow carried such a bow. I had this crafted to honor that legacy." "It's beautiful," Rowena acknowledged, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "A traditional gift," Radolf continued, "for a princess soon to be betrothed." The room fell silent. Aelith glanced at Rowena, whose face had gone carefully blank, the expression she wore when masking surprise or displeasure. "Betrothal." Rowena's voice was neutral. "I've heard nothing of this from my father. The king has been in discussions with neighboring realms," Radolf said smoothly. "For the good of Dunhallow, of course. I believe an announcement is planned for tonight's feast." The celebration proceeded with outward gaiety, but Aelith could feel Rowena's tension like a storm gathering. As twilight approached, they retreated to the princess's chambers to prepare for the grand feast. "Did you know?" Rowena demanded once they were alone, pacing the floor like a caged falcon. "About this arrangement?" "No, your highness," Aelith replied truthfully. "The king has said nothing to me." "I am not ready to be sold like a prized mare," Rowena said bitterly. "Not to some foreign prince who sees me as nothing but Dunhallow's crown." Aelith helped Rowena into her festival gown, midnight blue silk embroidered with silver stars, a mirror of Dunhallow's night sky. As she fastened the delicate clasps, she noticed Rowena still wore the simple wooden oak medallion beneath her finery. "You still wear it," Aelith observed softly. Rowena touched the medallion. "It gave me strength once. Perhaps it will again tonight." The great hall had been transformed for the feast. Banners of blue and silver hung from the rafters, tables groaned beneath platters of spring delicacies, and musicians played from the gallery above. King Cedric presided from the high table, with Rowena at his right hand and Aelith standing vigilant behind her chair. As the final course was cleared, the king rose to speak. The hall fell silent in anticipation. "Today we celebrate not only the bounty of spring, but the 16th year of my beloved daughter," he began, his voice carrying to the farthest corners. "Princess Rowena, the future of Dunhallow. Polite applause rippled through the gathering. It is traditional, the king continued, for royal daughters to forge alliances through marriage. Many of you have heard rumors of such negotiations. Aelith felt Rowena tense beneath her hand. These rumors are true. I have indeed been in discussion with neighboring kingdoms regarding my daughter's future. Lord Radolf's satisfied smile was impossible to miss. However, the king said, his next words falling like stones into still water, I have decided that Dunhallow's strength lies not in foreign alliances, but in the wisdom and character of its future ruler. Confused murmurs spread through the hall. This was not the announcement they had expected. 1 year ago, King Cedric continued, when raiders threatened my daughter's life, it was not foreign allies who saved her. It was not even our own nobility. His gaze swept the assembled lords and ladies, many of whom shifted uncomfortably. It was a child of Dunhallow, with nothing to her name but courage and compassion. All eyes turned to Aelith, who maintained her guardian's stance despite the sudden attention. That day taught me that true worth is measured not by bloodlines or treaties, but by actions in moments of crisis. And so, I declare that Princess Rowena shall not be betrothed to any foreign prince. Instead, she shall rule Dunhallow in her own right when the time comes, choosing her own consort if and when she wishes. The hall erupted in shocked exclamations. Lord Radolf's face darkened with fury. Sire, he protested, rising to his feet, this breaks centuries of tradition. The princess needs a strong husband to— The princess, King Cedric interrupted coldly, needs loyal subjects who value Dunhallow's future above their own ambitions. Or have you forgotten who truly stood by her when danger came? Before Radolf could respond, the massive doors of the great hall burst open. A royal guard staggered in, blood streaming from a wound in his side. Raiders! He gasped before collapsing. The west gate has fallen. They're inside the castle. Chaos erupted as nobles scrambled from their seats. Aelith's training took over instantly. She drew her guardian's blade and positioned herself before Rowena. To the safe room, she commanded, all protocol forgotten in the moment of crisis. Now, Your Highness. But as they turned to the concealed passage behind the high table, Aelith's sharp eyes caught movement in the shadows. A figure in the livery of Dunhallow, but with a dagger drawn and eyes fixed on the princess. Assassin! She shouted, pushing Rowena behind her. Guards to the princess! The false guard lunged forward, but Aelith was faster. She parried his strike, her smaller blade dancing around his larger one with the precision Theodric had drilled into her for countless hours. The assassin snarled, revealing teeth filed to points, the mark of the Blackwood Raiders, mercenaries known for their savagery. The little warden, he sneered. They said you'd be trouble. They were right, Aelith replied, feinting left before striking right. Her blade found its mark, sliding between the assassin's ribs. He gasped, surprise replacing the sneer as he crumpled to the floor. Aelith turned to find King Cedric staring at her, his sword half drawn. Behind him, Lord Radolf stood frozen, his expression unreadable. Get my daughter to safety, the king ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. I will deal with the raiders. Yes, Your Majesty. Aelith grasped Rowena's arm, guiding her toward the passage. But as they reached the hidden door, she glanced back to see Lord Radolf moving toward the king, a strange gleam in his eyes, and something metallic glinting in his palm. Your Majesty, behind you! Aelith's warning pierced the chaos of the hall. King Cedric turned just as Lord Radolf lunged, a thin stiletto blade gleaming in his hand. The king parried the blow with his sword, but age had slowed his reactions. The stiletto sliced across his arm, drawing a line of crimson against the royal blue. Traitor, Cedric growled, his face pale with shock, more than pain. Not traitor, Radolf corrected coldly. Visionary. Dunhallow needs strength, not sentiment. Your decision tonight proves you've grown too weak to rule. Guards rushed toward them, but more assassins emerged from among the panicked nobles, blocking their path. Aelith stood frozen in indecision, her duty to protect Rowena warring with her instinct to aid the king. Go, Cedric commanded, reading her thoughts. Protect the princess. That is your sworn duty. Aelith pulled Rowena through the hidden passage, sealing the entrance behind them. The narrow stone corridor wound deep into the castle's foundations, lit only by occasional wall sconces that cast long, grotesque shadows. My father, Rowena whispered, her voice tight with fear. We cannot leave him. We're not leaving him. Aelith replied, guiding her forward. "We're ensuring his sacrifice isn't in vain. Commander Theodric and the loyal guards will protect him." They emerged in a small chamber beneath the eastern tower, one of several safe rooms built into Dunhallow's original design. Aelith secured the heavy door, then moved to the arrow slit that offered a limited view of the courtyard below. "Raiders everywhere," she reported grimly. "But they're not attacking randomly. They're targeting specific guards, those loyal to your father." "This was planned," Rowena said, her royal composure returning despite the danger. "Radolf has been plotting this for months, perhaps years. The announcement tonight must have forced his hand," Aelith agreed. "He couldn't allow you to rule independently." A pounding at the door made them both jump. Aelith drew her blade, positioning herself between Rowena and the entrance. "Princess," a familiar voice called. "Princess Rowena, are you there?" "Gareth?" Rowena responded, recognition in her tone. "Yes, my father sent me to find you. You're in danger." Aelith and Rowena exchanged glances. Gareth was Radolf's son, but he had never shown his father's naked ambition. "Why should we trust you?" Aelith called through the door. "Because I bring news of the king," Gareth replied, "and because I can get you out of the castle before my father's men find you." After a moment's hesitation, Aelith unbarred the door. Gareth stumbled in, his fine festival clothes torn and smeared with soot. A shallow cut marked his cheek. "The king lives," he said immediately, reading the question in their eyes. "But he's wounded and captured. My father plans to force his abdication by dawn." "And why are you helping us?" Aelith demanded, her blade still ready. Gareth's eyes flashed with unexpected fire. "Because I won't be party to treason. My father raised me to value honor above all else, then abandoned his own at the first opportunity. If the king is captured, all of Dunhallow will fall to Radolf," Rowena said, her mind working through the implications. "We need loyal forces. The castle garrison is divided," Gareth explained. "Some fight for the king, others for my father. But the common folk, they would rally to you, Princess. The common folk have no weapons, no training," Aelith pointed out. "No," Rowena agreed, "but they have numbers, and they have something Radolf's mercenaries don't. Love for Dunhallow." Determination hardened her delicate features. "We need to reach the city. From there, we can rally support and retake the castle." Gareth nodded. "I know a way through the old sewers. It's how the raiders entered, and it's how we can leave." Aelith's instincts screamed caution, but there were few options. "Lead on," she said, "but know that if you betray us, my blade will find your heart before you take another breath." Gareth's smile was grim. "I would expect nothing less from the first warden." Their journey through Dunhallow's underbelly was a nightmare of darkness and foul water. The ancient sewers, built when the castle was first raised, ran beneath the fortress and emptied into the river beyond the city walls. Rats scattered before them, and the stench was nearly overwhelming. "This passage connects to the temple crypts," Gareth whispered as they emerged from the worst of the sewers. "From there, we can reach the lower city undetected." As they moved through the silent crypts, past stone effigies of Dunhallow's ancient kings, Aelith felt a strange sense of being watched. The air seemed to thicken around them, heavy with more than just the dust of centuries. "Do you feel that?" she whispered to Rowena. The princess nodded, her hand instinctively moving to the wooden medallion beneath her gown. "The old stories say the first kings of Dunhallow still watch over their realm." They emerged into the lower city to find it already in turmoil. News of the attack had spread, and terrified citizens hurried through the streets, some fleeing, others gathering in confused groups. "We need a rallying point," Rowena said, surveying the chaos. "The bridge square," Aelith suggested immediately. "It's central, and it's where the people gather for announcements." They made their way through side streets and alleys, avoiding Radolf's patrols. When they reached Bridge Square, Rowena climbed onto the stone pedestal at its center, the same spot where royal proclamations had been read for generations. "People of Dunhallow," she called, her voice carrying across the square. "Hear me." Gradually, the crowd grew still, faces turning toward the princess in her torn and soiled festival gown. "Tonight, Lord Radolf has committed treason against the crown. My father, your king, is wounded and held captive. Dunhallow stands at the edge of ruin." Murmurs of fear rippled through the gathering. "But we are not defeated," Rowena continued, her voice strengthening. "Dunhallow is not its castle walls or noble houses. Dunhallow is its people, all its people." She reached for the wooden medallion, pulling it from beneath her gown for all to see. 1 year ago, when raiders first threatened our land, it was not armies that saved your princess. It was a single child of Dunhallow, armed with nothing but courage and compassion. Aelith stood straighter as eyes turned to her. That child became my guardian, Rowena declared. And now I ask you, all of you, to become guardians of Dunhallow in its darkest hour. For a moment, silence hung over the square. Then a blacksmith stepped forward, his hammer raised high. For the true king, he roared. Others joined him, butchers with cleavers, carpenters with mallets, farmers with pitchforks. Women brought kitchen knives and rolling pins. Boys gathered stones for slinging. Within an hour, a ragtag army had assembled. Gareth, proving his loyalty, organized them into rough companies. Aelith moved among them, sharing what little military knowledge she had gained in her year of training. As dawn approached, they marched on the castle, not as a disciplined force, but as a tide of righteous fury. Radolf's mercenaries, expecting to face only the divided castle guard, found themselves confronted by hundreds of determined citizens attacking from all sides. At the vanguard, Aelith and Rowena fought side by side, guardian and princess, their blades moving in practiced harmony. They cut a path to the Great Hall, where Radolf had established his command. They burst through the doors to find King Cedric bound to his own throne, his crown placed mockingly askew on his head. Lord Radolf stood before him, a parchment in one hand and a sword in the other. "Sign the abdication," Radolf was saying, "or watch your kingdom burn." "I think not," Rowena called, her voice ringing through the hall. Radolf spun, his face contorting with rage and disbelief. "How? Your son has more honor than his father," Aelith answered, nodding to where Gareth stood among the citizens flooding into the hall. "Impossible," Radolf snarled. "The city guards are outnumbered by their own people," Rowena finished. "People who remember that true nobility isn't about birth, but about what lives in the heart." Radolf's eyes darted around the hall, seeing his mercenaries overwhelmed, his co-conspirators surrendering. With a howl of desperation, he lunged toward King Cedric, sword raised for a killing blow. Aelith moved without thinking, her guardian's blade intercepting his with a sound like thunder. The impact jarred her to the bone, but years of forest survival and months of relentless training held her steady. "You," Radolf spat. "Always you. The little nothing who ruined everything." "Not nothing," Aelith replied calmly. "Dunhallow." Their blades danced in deadly rhythm, Radolf's greater strength matched by Aelith's speed and precision. For every powerful strike he delivered, she answered with 2 quick counters. But he was a master swordsman with decades of experience, and gradually, inexorably, he forced her back. "You fight well," he admitted, "for an orphaned rat. But this is the difference between birth and chance. Blood will tell." He feinted left, then struck with devastating force from the right. Aelith parried, but the blow drove her to one knee. "Blood will tell," she agreed, her breath coming in gasps. "But not in the way you think." With her free hand, she reached for the small pouch at her belt, the pouch that still contained herbs gathered from the forest. She flung its contents into Radolf's face, the dried nettle and thistledown creating a cloud that momentarily blinded him. In that instant of confusion, Aelith struck, not with a killing blow, but with the precise disarming technique Theodric had drilled into her countless times. Radolf's sword clattered to the floor as he staggered backward. Guards surged forward, seizing the traitor before he could recover. King Cedric, freed from his bonds, rose shakily to his feet. "Well done, First Warden," he said, his voice rough but proud. "Once again, you saved the crown of Dunhallow." 3 days later, the kingdom gathered once more in the Great Hall, not for celebration this time, but for justice. Lord Radolf stood before the throne, chains binding his wrists and ankles. "For the crime of high treason against the crown," King Cedric pronounced. "The sentence is death." Radolf's proud posture never wavered, even in defeat. "I acted for Dunhallow's future," he declared. "History will judge who was right." "Indeed it will," the king agreed, "which is why I commute your sentence to exile. You will live to see the future you so feared, a Dunhallow ruled by wisdom rather than tradition, by compassion rather than strength alone." As the former lord was led away, the king turned to his daughter. "The time has come to formalize what began a year ago." At his gesture, Princess Rowena stepped forward, taking her place beside the throne. Aelith moved to stand at her customary position, but the princess shook her head. Not there, Rowena said softly. Here, beside me. Confused, Aelith joined her at the front of the dais. King Cedric rose, removing a small wooden box from within his robes. Aelith, daughter of Merwyn, he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. 1 year ago you saved the heir to Dunhallow when all others failed. Today, you have saved Dunhallow itself. He opened the box, revealing a silver circlet set with a single blue stone. By royal decree I name you Lady Aelith of the Bridge, guardian of the crown and protector of the realm. From this day forward, your house shall stand as equals among the nobility of Dunhallow, a living reminder that true worth comes not from ancient bloodlines, but from the courage to act when action is needed most. Stunned, Aelith knelt as the king placed the circlet upon her head. When she rose, she was no longer simply the orphan daughter of a healer, but a lady of the realm in her own right. Princess Rowena stepped forward, taking Aelith's hands in her own. Around her neck, the simple wooden medallion caught the light from the high windows. From bridge to throne, Rowena said, echoing the ancient motto of Dunhallow. The true path is rarely straight, but always true. The great hall erupted in cheers, not the polite applause of courtiers, but the genuine celebration of a kingdom that had rediscovered its heart. In that moment, as the sun streamed through stained glass to paint the floor in jeweled light, Aelith understood that some bridges, once crossed, transform not just those who walk them, but the very lands they connect. Outside the castle walls, 30 knights in gleaming armor assembled in the courtyard. They were not the blackguards who had found Aelith and Rowena in the forest clearing a year before, but a new order, men and women drawn from every level of Dunhallow society, chosen for their character rather than their birth. Above them flew a new banner, midnight blue like Dunhallow's sky, but emblazoned with a silver oak branch clasped in the talons of a raven. The banner of the bridge, they called it, and those who served beneath it would forever remember that the kingdom's greatest strength was found not in its stone walls or ancient traditions, but in the unexpected courage of a small orphan who dared to cross the divide between worlds. And in the years that followed, when children of Dunhallow asked why the knights who guarded their princess came from farm and forge, as often as from noble houses, their parents would tell them the tale of little Aelith, who helped a limping princess cross a bridge, and in doing so, built a bridge of her own, one that would stand for generations to come. In the quiet moments before sleep, Princess Rowena would still touch the wooden medallion at her throat and whisper the words Aelith had taught her that first desperate day. It protects those with just hearts. And throughout Dunhallow, in grand halls and humble homes alike, people came to understand that the true measure of nobility was never the circumstances of one's birth, but the choices made when those circumstances were most challenging. For bridges once built invite us all to cross from where we are to where we might be, if only we have the courage to take that first step.